The known world of Kaimere is a competitive place, with fauna converging from 2 continents, a huge island, a periodic bridge to the enormous landmass of Kairul, and of course, constant harvests from Earth. The known world is an ecological arena. Large dinosaurs often have an advantage in, at least from Earth, there's not much competition coming through, at least for breeding adults. Native mammals of Kaimere don't have this luxury. However, native mammals are not without their breakout stars. Some, like the common hyena we met last week, come from the ecological big leagues of Kairul and have dominated the niche of cursorial predator in their weight class throughout Nikar and much of northern Arvel. Other times, predators coming in from Earth find a lot of success as invasive species, especially in times of ecological turmoil, bringing new competition and disease. The leopard is one such case. They were harvested from Africa 250,000 years ago amidst the turnover of the Nikari Prairie with the arrival of housey grass from Kairul. Lions were among the harvested, but these kings of the African grasslands were peasants at the feet of the Uktan, new monarch of the prairie. Such a drop in status proved more than they could adapt. Trying to rule when they weighed between 5 and 10% of the competition was utter folly. The leopard, on the other hand, was quite used to a subordinate status. The grasslands of Pleistocene Africa were even more dense and competitive than they are today, and leopards were quite adapted at using what they needed to survive in the shadows. They were used to being the underdog. When lions, hyena, and several species of saber-toothed cat brawled on the ground, leopards dragged their kills into trees. This seems a behavior largely driven by pressures from hyenas, a trait which would prove extremely beneficial in the future. Lions, spotted hyenas, saber-toothed cats, and other harvested heavyweights all perished in this new habitat. For the leopard, when they came to Kaimere, quite frankly, very little changed. They were now more pronghorn than gazelle, but both animals like to rest in the shade of the same trees that leopards drop from, and it doesn't much matter to the cats if their prey is a bit faster or boasts greater endurance. Both suffocate under the same effort. Leopards are a medium-sized cat within the genus Panthera. Our current understanding is that there are 2 lineages of Panthera, with leopards, lions, and jaguars on one branch, and tigers and snow leopards on the other. Leopards are the most widespread big cat on Earth. This is also true in modern Kaimere. Their origin may have been to be placed in the scattered woodlands of the prairie, but they wouldn't be restricted there for long. As common hyenas charged through Nikar and northern Arvel, altering the status quo wherever they went, leopards found great success in the chaos. The prairies had enough scattered forests that leopards had the cover they needed to survive. However, open forests to the south and west proved even better habitat for them. Several big cats of comparable niches were quickly outcompeted as leopards spread. It can be tempting to see this as the might of the leopard, but it seems more likely that they were just better at dancing in the ecological flames as common hyenas burned across Nikar. Sometimes it matters less what an animal can do when times are good, so much as how they can handle when times are not. Being already used to getting their meals into trees due to pressure from hyenas was probably a key to their success. Several species of Panthera perished. A relative of snow leopards, but with tropical adaptations, had species in both Nikar and Arvel, along with the Nikari cougar, but all seemed to perish and were replaced by the leopard. These Panthera were smaller than leopards, and cougars were the same size, but with smaller skulls. Being a small cat with more powerful jaws may have helped the leopards take over, but it could have also been a matter of luck or even disease spread with them that the native cats were not resistant to. The Ndogash, or Chimeran tiger, was once found throughout the forests and grasslands of Nikar. Tigers already had to be smaller than most on Earth so that they could cache their kills either in small thickets on the ground or in trees out of reach of theropods and terror birds. This pressure was compounded with a new abundance of hyenas. This was a lot of pressure for tigers, other panthera, and cougars. It seems likely that leopards were just used to playing this game. A small advantage can quickly compound on an ecological scale. Tigers now only reside in two isolated forests, the red tiger in imperial lands and the golden tiger along the southwest coast. Both are considered rare, with the red tiger being endangered due to retaliations by local peoples. In this arena, living near people, leopards have also fared better. They are smaller and therefore much more difficult for hunters to find and trap, even if they're easier to kill once caught. They certainly don't thrive near human settlements, doing better in the wild, but by not being as wary as tigers and many other Chimeran cats, leopards have developed a reputation as being much less affected. While leopards are flexible generalists on a species scale, individuals usually develop narrow specializations in prey preference. These specialties tend to be in whatever game is locally abundant, preferably without other specialized competition. While they tend to favor game that is their size or maybe a bit smaller, something that can be reliably dragged into a tree, big toms in less predator-dense areas have become specialized in game many times their size, becoming good at taking down large ungulates, thescelosaurs, and young of giant dinosaurs. The red panther is a Metailuran saber-toothed cat found throughout much of the known world. They were the breakout stars in the aftermath of the Southeast Asian harvest 1.5 million years ago, though their origin in this harvest, or just a native mechairodont that happened to succeed in the faunal turnover, remains to be seen. Perhaps because this cat was most successful in dense forest and wetlands, and therefore wouldn't suffer much under the hyena expansion, they appear to have held their niche in the serratic wetlands and most jungles throughout Nikar. Without hyenas shaking the foundation, leopards failed to as thoroughly take over this niche as they have in other areas. We will learn more about the red panther later this month. Thylacoleo has two Nikari species. The larger of these marsupial predators was a sloth specialist and didn't change much under competition with leopards. The lesser Nikari pouch lion did lose some ground as both an ambush predator that rely upon trees, but even the smaller pouch lions tend to favor larger game than leopards, so they have managed some cohabitation. In southern Nikar, the ecological warpath of the common hyena carried leopards into the mountains. Tigers perished and Homotherium became quite scarce. In the wake of hyenas, the leopards settled into two populations, one in the western peninsula, the other to the east and quite far up the coast. These mountain subspecies look quite familiar, but unlike the mountain hyenas, which often island hop between the peninsulas, these two seem quite distinct to a point that many are given distinct subspecies. The western Telmeid panther, Panthera pardus altus, in the west, and the eastern Telmeid panther, Panthera pardus stegophilus, to the east. While common hyenas aren't particularly abundant in Arvel, perhaps being stopped by the stability of Homotherium in this niche, leopards kept on thriving. It seems, in the geological blink of an eye, they took over the niche of mid-sized ambush predator of open forests, closed jungles, and the few grassy valleys of northern Arvel. It appears this continent didn't really have something in their size range. Lions were present and smaller than African lions, so quite able to climb trees. Lions had already driven puma in the area to extinction, so the niche was made more available to leopards, at least on the smaller end. Lions didn't give way to leopards as tigers did, perhaps because, like Homotherium, their population in this continent was much more stable at the time. Red panthers were also quite established here, dominating wetlands and many dense forest niches. There was only one species of Thylacoleo, a massive bruiser specialized in sloth. Leopards adapted to all of this competition by getting smaller. The distance in mass between Arvelith lions and the small Nimmervid and clouded leopards is substantial enough that leopards were able to slot in. By competing less with lions and more with these smaller cats, and having superior agility despite a larger frame, proved extremely successful. However, once they reached southern Arvel, it was a very familiar face which stood in their way: the cave leopard. This animal is generally thought to be descended of Panthera pardus spelea, the European cave leopard, which some scholars just believe is a European population of the Persian leopard subspecies. However, in Kaimere they are usually given their own subspecies or even species. Cave leopards are extremely successful in southern Arvel, but themselves seemed never able to penetrate the northern forests the way that Arvelith lions did. Like the mountain panthers of Nikar, it is generally believed that cave leopards have some of whatever tiger lion Panthera was in the region prior to their harvest between 700 and 600,000 years ago. However, others suggest that they are hybrids not with a native Panthera, but with Panthera gombazoigensis that was likely harvested at the same time, but has no known descendants. Either way, genetic studies show that they have some tiger lion Panthera in them. Regardless of why they are so distinct, and which other species of Panthera have influenced their mitochondrial genome, many naturalists argue that they qualify as their own species, Panthera antiquus. In eastern Arvel, where the southern steppes meet the northern forests, a third leopard subspecies of Arvel is found, the Cadanith panther. They look very much like a mix between cave and Arvelith leopards, and genetic studies support this conclusion. They tend to be given their own subspecies designation though, Panthera pardus chimerensis. They are larger on average and have thicker fur than most Arvelith leopards, but not as large or densely furred as the cave leopard. Their range spans from north of Qajar, the peninsula itself, and the islands of the Free States. Though it is assumed the original Qajarith population was culled, like the Qajarith lion, Cadanith leopards repopulated the peninsula, both from the mainland and possibly Free States Island too. Especially as many lions have been killed in Qajar and eradicated in the Free States to make the countryside safer, the Cadanith leopard has quickly become a dominant predator in both regions. Further southeast on the remote island of Picardia, another of the relic Panthera species persists, the Kakonu, or Picardian leopard. Despite the name and long-time assumption that it was another subspecies of leopard, it is generally presumed to belong to the snow leopard and tiger lineage of Panthera. As they are deeply sacred to a faction of the Picardiant, all remains in assembly archives were returned to Picardia long before a robust genetic study was available. However, casts and diagrams certainly suggest a closer relationship to the snow leopard is more likely than the cave leopard, as was once proposed. Again, verification of this theory seems unlikely, and it is still often called the Picardian leopard, but the consensus is that this animal is only a distant relative of its namesake. However, they behave quite similar to leopards, and much of what has been said about leopards above applies to them. They tend to be smaller than cave leopards, though have a more robust build, so their toms can also reach 100 kilos in the largest specimens. Despite this size, they still tend to target smaller prey and cache in trees, despite their main competition in the form of the red panther and indrikai, both being proficient climbers. Neither of these predators are prone to steal kills, however, while the wolves, Weochituka, and brown hyena definitely do. As the three predators that do steal kills cannot climb, it seems caching is worth the effort. Today, there are 4 generally recognized clades of leopards: the cave leopard, the Arvelith leopard, the Nikari leopard, and the Telmeid leopards. Several have multiple subspecies. Largest is the cave leopard of southern Arvel, which is similar in size to Arvelith lions and Nikari tigers, with toms sometimes exceeding 150 kilos, though most are between 80 and 100 kilos. Sexual dimorphism is present in all leopards, but most extreme in the cave leopard, where females are often between 40 and 50 kilos. Even the largest toms still occasionally cache prey in trees, which they do with more confident security than some leopards because their main competition, spotted hyenas and Homotherium, either cannot climb or are quite poor at doing so. Tree caching is the pride and joy of the smallest leopard, Panthera pardus crashir. Especially in open forests, it is often a necessity. Hyenas, Homotherium, lions, common cockatrice, terror birds, and many other potential threats could easily steal a leopard's kill in most open forests. While Arvelith lions and Homotherium can climb, with lions being better at it than African lions due to their smaller size, they still cannot climb nearly as well or as high as the Arvelith leopard. So this behavior means leopards are able to make their home regardless of where competing species are more abundant on the ground below. Most males are around 50 kilos or less, so they very much avoid the wrath of all the predators that might compete with a bigger panther. It must be said that tree caching doesn't always happen. If a kill was made with proper stealth and execution, it can be better to eat a meal in secret on the ground and perhaps cache after eating if there's enough leftovers worth taking. Dragging a kill up into a tree is often quick since leopards are capable climbers and very strong for their size, but it can still draw attention. If a lion didn't notice the kill, they might see it being taken in caching, so it can sometimes be best to just eat on the ground. Also, while strong, it takes effort. It can be better to spend a few minutes after a kill, eating and then abandon it, than burn the calories dragging it up a tree only for the kill to be stolen. Leopards can climb higher than lions, but doing so with a kill may not always be worth the effort. The Rukel is a massive parrot in Arvel, which is the main threat in higher branches. These flightless birds aren't particularly abundant or widespread, and being slower omnivores, they don't regularly compete for the same prey, but they will steal cached leopard kills and even kill leopards when they get the chance. Leopards, in turn, will hunt them, with large toms being quite good at it. So many leopards killing by Rukel seems driven by revenge. In general, leopards tend to avoid the territory of Rukel parrots, as caching in trees near a parrot nest is just asking for the kill to get stolen, and thanks to hyenas, it's not like the ground is safe for them to feed in the open forests Rukel tend to prefer. The most abundant and genetically diverse Chimeran leopard subspecies is the second largest after the cave leopard, and certainly the largest of African stock, Panthera pardus ajax. Toms in the western forests can reach an impressive 100 kilograms, with some prairie leopards are still around the same size as large leopards in India, though in many regions they are as small as Arvelith leopards. It seems the versatility of this species is best seen in these Nikari leopards, which despite frequent genetic exchange, have a very wide variation in size. Nikari leopards tend to be smaller, where tigers and red panthers are abundant, but especially in imperial lands where tiger numbers are dwindling, leopards have been reported to get larger. When they can step up, they do, but leopards are quite content to wait for their chance on the sidelines. Not all leopards cache their kills. The two Telmeid leopards, for example, often don't need to. Hyenas and common cockatrice aren't particularly abundant, and white cockatrice rarely scavenge. Absent necessity, these leopards don't put in the effort. If they do cache, it's often just with leaf litter covering the body. Also, they share niche with the larger and more powerful species of Nikari thylacoleo, which are also better climbers thanks to more flexible shoulders and an opposable thumb. It is likely that, since they would have to cache extremely high up in the trees that, in boreal forests, aren't particularly conducive to caching, they simply don't bother. Better to just find the nearest cover and quickly eat what you can. The leopards of the Telmeid Highlands are, despite looking quite different than most Nikari leopards, quite genetically similar to their lowland cousins. The wandering of Ajax toms mixing with both mountain populations means there's some question about the merits of subspecies designation. That said, the mountain panthers are definitely distinct in appearance. They are smaller than most Ajax, despite living in a cooler region. Perhaps unusual, but they tend to have less game to hunt, so a smaller size is perhaps understandable. Their predecessor, a panther related to snow leopards, once occupied the mountains. It has been suggested that they may have partially hybridized with other panther was there, but this has not yet been verified. Panthera hybrids are well documented on Earth. Usually this is in captivity, but as Panthera seems quite hostile to other species, it almost never happens in the wild. In Kaimere, Panthera hybrids are more frequent in the wild due to the nature of the portal. Especially as new species are introduced without an established niche, likely under ecological stress of native species, it shouldn't be surprising that hybridization occurs more frequently in this stressful context than in stable ecosystems. Many leopard subspecies in Kaimere appear to be quite different, and hybridizing with endangered Panthera that were in the niches before them could well account for some of this. The size of some western Nikari leopards has been proposed to be due to hybridization with the tiger. There may well be a small Panthera that are Velith leopards displaced, and so forth. Perhaps this is simply a highly adaptive cat, but the hybrid model seems plausible in the context of the known world. Arvelith lions and leopards were once proposed to influence each other's populations. Arvelith lions have more spotting, sometimes to a degree where rosettes are visible, though it must be said that some lions simply retain juvenile spotting into adulthood, and this could simply be a neotenic trait, naturally selected for in a more forested environment. Melanism is not found in modern lions, but it is seen in some Arvelith lions, supposedly further evidence of this history of genetic exchange. However, genetic studies don't support any leopard-lion hybrids in Arvel, though Arvelith lions do show traces of a different tiger-lion Panthera. This will be discussed further in next week's lion episode. While it can be tempting to assume that Kaimere's tigers have more of a blend of rosettes and stripes due to hybridization with leopards, it may also be that the distinctive stripes we're used to in our tigers could be the result of an intensive bottleneck Earth tigers underwent around 100,000 years ago. Pseudo-melanistic leopards have a similar blend of spots and stripes. If the stripe mutation showed up in a few members of this bottleneck and proved very successful, it wouldn't be that surprising that such a recent mutation could be so widespread. Chimeran tigers may indeed be hybrids of leopards or whatever basal Panthera shared the reason prior to the African harvest, but it's also possible that what we think of as a normal tiger could just be a strange lucky mutant which happened to survive the near extinction of their species on Earth. Prehistoric tigers may well have had greater diversity of rosette patterns than we're used to only having modern tigers as a comparison. While hybrids are documented in genetic studies of some Chimeran species of Panthera, they have also never been reported in modern populations. It is likely just a relic of stressed populations clashing in the immediate aftermath of the harvests. At the end of the day, different Panthera species are quite hostile toward one another. Only in times of scarcity and potential mates, or in captivity where they are forced to acclimate, does regular, reliable hybridization occur. In healthy wild species, it seems that, as on Earth, Chimeran felids mate with their own species. Melanistic leopards, or black panthers, are not common in the wild. On Earth, they seem only common in very dense rainforests like those in southern India. In leopards, it is tied to a recessive allele, and in jaguars it is dominant, so it is likely an independent mutation. They may seem entirely black in poorly lit conditions. Good lighting shows that they retain the spots and rosettes. It's just easily lost in a darker base pigment. While the mutation is pretty widespread, it is not as successful as one might initially imagine. It leaves the panther easy to spot during the day, especially in more open terrain. Fine while hunting at night in dense foliage, but in areas with diurnal predators, it can easily be seen during the day is obviously not beneficial. Also, while leopards are solitary, they do need some social interaction when confronting other leopards or seeking a mate. White ear patches, for example, may be very important to the body language to signal submission or other emotions that melanistic leopards would struggle to express, making them possibly unable to pacify an aggressor or put a potential mate at ease. Obviously not impossible, as black leopards can and do reproduce and hold territory in the wild, but these are some possible challenges that they may face with this mutation. In Kaimere, it is very rare for Nikari leopards of any subspecies to be melanistic. The western population of Ajax panthers can be as much as 20% melanistic, usually more like 10%, likely thriving due to a combination of how rare tigers are in this area and how dense the rainforest is. Melanistic panthers are only rarely seen on the prairie. These are quite sacred to the Shu, who believe them to be benevolent guides to the afterlife, but they seem to struggle in this very open context. It has never been documented in mountain panthers. While rare in cave leopards, it happens often enough that, like the Shu, they are significant omens to many southern Arvelith peoples. Arvel is much more kind to this mutation. Coastal and riverside jungles are often very densely forested, so black panthers can often be much more comfortable. Some regions in Arvel have as many as half of their panthers being melanistic. This mutation is also quite common in Picardia, so abundant that they were once thought to be an entirely distinct animal. The Panther clans is a confederation of 3 tribes, each represented by a panther: black, gold, and red. Black panthers are seen as the witches and covert assassins, gold the voice and leaders of this confederation, and red the warriors. That red and gold panthers are the same animals is not widely accepted by many Picardians. As they are sacred and therefore genetic studies have not been conducted, it is not known if their mutation is dominant like jaguars or recessive like leopards. As they are from an entirely different Panthera lineage, it could well be a third independent mutation and either dominant or recessive. Considering the great diversity of Panthera in Kaimere, some within the assembly distinguish these two branches as distinct genera or subgenera, Panthera and Uncia, with this genus of snow leopards named shortly after the genus Panthera. Under this classification, Uncia would cover Earth and Kaimere tigers, Picardian leopards, and the snow leopard. Panthera would include lions, jaguars, leopards, and in Kaimere cover the cave leopards, common leopards, and 2 lion species. Hybridization often muddies these distinctions depending on which species and genus concept a given researcher favors. As lions and tigers can produce fertile offspring, and Earth scientists generally maintain all should be within the same genus, Panthera is still convention, although assembly texts often use tiger lion and lion lion Panthera to distinguish between the two. Unsurprising considering their wide range and relative willingness to live near people, leopards are prominent features in culture and folklore of most Chimeran peoples. Teacher and assassin, warrior and poet, hero and villain. Because of their abundance and frequency near settlements, coupled with being around the same size as people, leopards are among the most common form taken by shapeshifter lineages. Nearly every Chimeran culture has stories of panther skin changers. To the Picardian, they are sacred warriors. To the Shu, they are often cast as sinister killers. Leopards are amongst the most prolific man-eaters. Unlike tigers and lions, from which man-eaters are usually injured or otherwise unable to hunt natural prey, leopards are more likely to develop this habit in good health. It is often large toms, which already tend to be more flexible due to having to wander far from their natal home and develop specialty in whatever is in abundance. If they come into an area where people are the most abundant game, this specialization should come as no surprise. In many areas near settlement, other large predators have been hunted to regional scarcity, and that's where leopards get bigger. Because of all this, male leopards near settlements are often plenty large enough to take down a grown Chimeran, small enough to evade detection, and athletic enough to scale most fortification. Killing these leopards often doesn't do much good, it only opens the territory for another tom. In light of all this, the best thing for a settlement is often to let Chimeran tigers, red panthers, thylacoleo, rukel parrots, and other animals that leopards avoid to remain in the area. As on Earth, the versatility of leopards has been a huge contributing factor to their success in Kaimere. They are quite dominant, in large part because they don't try to dominate. They take what they can, where they can. Being flexible and covert, this ends up being quite a lot. Cheers to Ian for sponsoring this episode. As I continue to work on my next anthology, having more short-form episodes has made it much easier while still making ends meet. This ended up being longer than most of my single-species episodes, but it's hard to consolidate on a species and its analogs, which are so important to the known world. I wanted to give another shout-out to Wildlife Wire. In preparation for this episode, I watched their chapter on the Amur leopard and spoke quite a bit with Dominic, one of their members currently studying leopards and other carnivores in Zambia. I, of course, take full responsibility for anything incorrect within this episode. Scientists are still learning and refining our understanding of modern big cats, and the fragmentary nature of many fossil animals mentioned in this episode means that they are up for even greater debate. Some of what I said may be unlikely or even proven false in the future, but I try to make things as up-to-date as possible. This project and my own understanding of the natural world is a work in progress. I know folks want all public lore to be set canon, but the reality is not only working on Kaimere is what funds it, the fact that we don't have an ironclad consensus on modern cats, much less extinct ones, means trying to lock Kaimere lore based on developing science would be utter folly. This episode presents leopards as they currently stand in Kaimere. That's about all I can say with certainty. Thank you so much to my Patreon patrons for your support. Without patrons and episode sponsors, I couldn't do this project with the focus that I do. A lot of time goes into research and illustrations, and I couldn't do it without you. My thanks also goes to you for watching. Even if you're not in a position to sponsor or be a patron, the ad revenue I get from these episodes is quite helpful. Thanks again to Ian, to Wildlife Wire for your advice, to my patrons for your support, and again, thank you for watching. Cheers, folks!